Hey YouTube, Alex here with Alex's Agamids, and as always, this is my annual video on my project of keeping and breeding Chinese water dragons, Indochinese water dragons, green water dragons, Asian water dragons. They're all, it's all common names for the same species, Physignathus cocincinus. And so here is another mini lecture, if you will, as far as my results for this breeding season. I did this style of video last year, or I should say at the start of this year, covering last year's breeding failure, but still the process that I went through. And while this year I definitely had some success as well as some failures, I just really like this format. A little bit biased because I am a college student. I love listening to like my professors lecture and just sharing topics they're passionate about. And in my opinion, as far as the formatting goes, I feel like I'm more easily able to convey information, data with you guys through a PowerPoint slide, as opposed to trying to do some fancy over the top edited video. I won't lie, guys, I'm a reptile keeper. I'm not a YouTuber. You're going to hear more a little bit about that later. So when it comes to sharing my experiences with Chinese water dragons through the YouTube platform, I'm going to prioritize having an educational video over a really nicely well edited video. So if you came here hoping I'm a true professional YouTuber, you're wrong. But I do like to consider myself quite the experienced reptile keeper because I've been working with reptiles now for the past 11 years of my life, both privately and then as well as at professional and private facilities. So I've got quite a few species under my belt. And in this case, species I've been working with for the past 5 years as far as breeding and keeping for the past 10 has been Chinese water dragons. So as always, breeding reptiles is never a pretty thing, especially in some aspects. So I just want to give a content warning. You know, some of the images you'll see here in one video I have are a little bit graphic, kind of disturbing. So if you don't like seeing the realities of reptile breeding, I'm going to politely ask that you stop watching the video, just because, again, for the sake of sharing educational content, you know, I'd rather show you guys how things are versus how you may want them to be, which I honestly get a lot of hate for at times because I'm too truthful about it. And either way, though, I just wanted to get this slide in here. So warning, if you don't like seeing, you know, deformed babies, I would suggest you stop watching. So I like to, I don't know, I have a really weird definition of success, if you will, because my definition of success is having really good fertility, really good hatch rates, and truly having healthy baby water dragons. I feel like I'm going to become a bit of an issue though, because I've got images all over my slides. So what I'm actually going to do is I am going to turn my camera off. So that way you guys can still hear me. You can see the little mouse cursor. And what I'll be able to do is I'll still be able to lecture and point through the rest of this. So this was from 2020, which I consider to be my best year breeding Indochinese water dragons. And what we can see here is the male and female copulating in March, exactly 29 days post-copulation. I got a clutch of 9 beautiful eggs, which is actually all of these little dudes right here. And then 32 days post that clutch, I got 12 good eggs. And 35 post that clutch, I got another 12 good eggs. This egg ended up being infertile. And what you can see here is I actually incubated this clutch at a different temperature than these two. And I think it's interesting because these are these babies at 10 days old. You can see how big and robust they are versus these babies which hatched from this clutch and they're 2 weeks old. And granted, the camera is panned back a bit, but you can see how much more full, how much brighter green these babies are versus these ones, which are actually a little bit smaller despite being 4 days older than the individuals here. But that'll be a topic for another breeding season. I still got to play around with some stuff. So the reason why I consider, and actually I should go back, the reason why I say I was fooled, if you will, is that I feel like this breeding season follows the stereotype of every reptile breeder. We see them mate, we figure, okay, 30 days to eggs, and we record it and we call it a day after we hatch babies and sell them. And so I honestly don't like that. You know, part of the reason why I enjoy working with Chinese water dragons is, one, they're beautiful lizards, and two, just a lot of people consider them difficult to breed, and I honestly haven't had that experience. What I find more difficult is figuring out what makes them breed. You know, once you have a healthy pair and you're keeping them properly, feeding them the grade A diet, they do great. But my, I guess, pinpoint moment, you know, the spark that starts the fire was actually before my main 3 clutches of 2020. And that's when Harriet here, my main breeding female, laid a clutch of dud eggs in January. And for the longest time, I was thinking to myself, why is that? Like, what made her explicitly choose to lay in January? You know, 2020 has been the only year that I've actually had 4 clutches of eggs laid. Harriet normally lays 3 clutches, and then this year was actually a little bit different. I only got 2, which I'll describe why I think that later. And the one commonality that I realized here that stood out differently from breedings in the past, say 2018 and 2019, is that I let Ozzy in her enclosure. So you can see Ozzy here. This is when I had the shelf. The enclosure looked very different. Here's Mama Harriet. You can see I would throw Ozzy in every once in a while. And this was approximately, say, 2 months, or I'd say roughly 5 weeks before she laid. And that's the trend there, 5 weeks. If you notice, aside from the copulation, which took a month, 29 days, 32, 35 days, which is roughly a 5-week period. And Harriet's also younger here, which I'll describe later. So 5 weeks, presence of a male, 5 weeks, eggs occur. And these were infertile eggs, but the point is something triggered her to want to cycle with Ozzy there. Maybe it was food, maybe it was the presence of the male. The point that I'm trying to get to is that when you're breeding reptiles, and a lot of the monitor keepers have this figured out, and I've been trying to translate that over into water dragons, is that there is a trigger. And so this is just notes as far as Chinese water dragons. This exact, I guess, chart, if you will, I derived from my captive wildlife class. So thank you, Dr. Shelley DeBay, because if it wasn't for learning about breeding animals in captivity, I don't think I could have started to figure this out. And pretty much with water dragons, what it comes down to is there is a trigger that makes a female create yolk or ova. And ova is what is used to make eggs. And the correct term is vitellogenesis, which literally just translates to yolk creation, genesis, vitel. Or vitel, yolk, genesis, creation, just like the book of Genesis, the book of creation. If you follow Christian religion, God made the world. I'm not religious, I'm just using that as an example. Pretty much based on my notes and findings, which you will see, I have speculated that it takes approximately 2 weeks, so 14 days, for a female to create yolk. From there, she will ovulate, and ovulation is where the ova leave the ovaries and they enter the oviducts. And so this is where then they're calcified, they grow, they're also fertilized in the oviducts, and that's a process we call ovulation. Then from ovulation, and the reason why I say PONR is that this is the point of no return. Once a female ovulates, those ova are going to be calcified and she is going to lay eggs. And this is, I guess, a little side tangent here. I hate how badly these 2 words are misused. You have no idea. In fact, you know, I'll say I have seen a YouTuber who also breeds Chinese water dragons say out loud that their female was ovulating, and so they paired the male with her because when a female ovulates, she will be receptive. That is not true. That is not physiologically possible. All of the fertilization or copulatory acts occur when the female is going through vitellogenesis. After she mates, the male's sperm is stored in her oviducts, and once the ova grow too large, the female ovulates, which sends those larger ova into the oviducts where they're fertilized through the process of ovulation. And after ovulation happens, then she becomes gravid or growing with eggs, and approximately 3 weeks after that, she will lay them. I know that was a mouthful of information. Again, I've got more drawings and the images will help you guys understand this process better. What gets a water dragon to start breeding? We want her to be breeding with the male so that way her ova become fertilized when she ovulates. Is it the increase in daylight? Is it the increase in rain? Is it the presence of a male? Is it because I start to increase food with warmer temps? Truth be told, I have no idea. I would love to try and figure out the exact thing that triggers it. However, that's sort of a question that I also don't want to answer, because all of the things that you have seen right here naturally occur in nature. You know, it's maybe there's rain that starts to die off at the start of the dry season and they mate in the dry season. That way the babies hatch in the wet season. Maybe they see the daylight increase. Either way, I do all of this in an artificial setting, and that does trigger the female to start going into vitellogenesis. So yeah, I have no idea the exact trigger. All I do know is that it's more than likely one of those, which begins the start of the cycle. So again, what are we now looking for in these images? Here she is having laid eggs. Here she is very close to laying. And if you guys remember from my video in 2020, I pointed out about the body morphology. The hip bones are more present, the tail muscles present, the fat pads on the back of the head are shrunken, and while she is gravid. This photo, if I'm not mistaken, is taken pretty much a week before she laid eggs based on the dates. You can see here, though, this is roughly 2 weeks before this photo, and the hip bones aren't as present. So is this her just beginning to ovulate, or perhaps she's cycling here? Again, I'm not sure. And you can see she's sort of bloated here as well, but the hip bone is not as prevalent as it is in this image. So we've got a lot of questions. Now, I know the answers to these questions now, but the point is I'm trying to get you guys thinking, man, why does her body look like this based on this time of the month versus, again, 2 weeks later? Now she's really gravid. Where are we trying to figure out what part of the cycle is she in these photos? So let's start with 2023 now, right? The 2022 season ended. I like to fatten the water dragons up before they fast pretty much for the winter. They don't eat as much during the cool months. And then once things start to warm up, that's when the breeding season begins. And 2023 has been a weird year for us here in the United States because it was a really warm winter. If I'm not mistaken, it was an El Nino year and there was a polar vortex. So that vortex is blowing wind and then the El Nino increases the heat, and it was bizarre. And so I've got a couple images here. One, you can see this is December 27th, and I noticed Harriet was really starting to get kind of bloated here, which is just abnormal. Normally she's still in her fasting period. And later, literally 5 days later, I get a photo from my friend Kristen over at Capital City Critters. One of her males, she's got like 6 breeding pairs of Chinese water dragons. One of her males is trying to copulate with a female. So my thought was, since Kristen's located in Michigan, I'm in Illinois, we have a very similar climate. I decided screw it, and so I threw Ozzy in with Harriet. Now, if you recall last year, I usually throw, or I say not just last year, but in years prior, I would normally throw Ozzy in with Harriet around March, and aside from 2019, where I was throwing him in during the winter months, right? So see, we're starting to compare some stuff now. This is where it gets exciting. I wanted to follow an ideology that Ron St. Pierre has preached, so I got to credit him for this. And that's the idea of keeping a pair together as long as possible. If you guys have heard me in all of my other videos on the channel, I preach to not keep Chinese water dragons together if you are a pet owner, because them fighting is more than likely an eventuality. However, I've got friends who keep their pairs together year-round. Kristen does, because she has plenty of spare enclosures that if he starts bullying her, she can just take him out. 99% of people think they can just keep them together and they do fine, and they don't have a full adult setup on standby in case they fight. I have those resources, so I just turned Ozzy's cage lights off and I threw him in with Harriet. You can see they're chilling out right down there, looking at me with the door open, and she's giving me the side eye of why the heck is this big guy in there. So what I was looking for, and this is also why I paired early, is this process of yolk creation. So again, please, please, please do mind my chicken scratch. I am not an artist. I just try and breed reptiles in captivity and understand it. So what I speculated is that because of the warm weather and the warm winter throwing her off, just as how Kristen was starting to see signs of her pair mating, which would imply that female was beginning to go through vitellogenesis, I suspected Harriet was as well. So this first photo, it gives you an idea. These small circles represent ova that have not grown yet. Just like humans, man, everything is born with a set number of eggs or offspring that it can have. So during yolk creation, the female releases a few of these ova to start growing, and this lasts for approximately 2 weeks. The other thing that I wanted to note, if you look at the way I drew the body, is that the swelling, I tried to show that it being, the swelling is more concentrated in the center of the body and not so much down by the tail base. This little mark here represents the hip bones, which are still hidden by the tail, and the legs looking normal. So this lasts for 2 weeks. This is when your pair will be mating. 2 weeks goes by, and now the female has got sperm in her oviducts, and she now has got these large ova that move into the oviducts to be fertilized. When this process happens, what you will see now is that the eggs have grown so much, the female's starting to lose weight. So her hip bones are going to be a little bit more noticeable. And again, at least what I've noticed with Harriet and other people's females, you might see the legs take on a flabby appearance, as highlighted by these lines right here. So yolk creation, mid-body swelling, and the ovum are in the center. And then as soon as she ovulates, those mature ovum are now fertilized after the male has bred with her during yolk creation, and they enter her oviducts. Morphologically, if we're looking for this on the outside, we check for the presence of hip bones starting to form and legs looking a bit flabby. I understand I'm repeating myself a bit. It's because this is a complicated topic. I know I have new viewers and old viewers and viewers that want to breed Chinese water dragons, so I'm just trying to get a point across to make it easier for all of you guys to learn, as I have spent a lot of time trying to understand this as well. And then, of course, the female being gravid. So now these eggs are massive. They're taking up a lot of space in her oviduct. You can see I tried to draw the legs even thinner, more dark lines showing how much, nutrients, how much body weight she's losing to make these eggs. And the tail is even thinner with the hip bones protruding even more. And notice too, unlike again with yolk creation, after she ovulates, I'm trying to convey here, which again you'll see with photos later, is that these eggs really swell up her body, and you get sort of this big curve right here, which again, maybe the drawing doesn't help, but we'll take a look at it from a photo perspective of a lizard that's going through these processes. And of course, after three weeks post ovulation and being gravid, eggs will be laid. So here she is going through vitellogenesis, more than likely. We can see that the swelling here is in the middle of her body. This is taken February 13th of this year. Her hip bone is present, but it's not as prominent as this photo. So I know what you guys are thinking. Alex, you literally just said vitellogenesis is a 2-week process, but why are these photos taken 20 days from each other? How do you know that? How would she ovulate in this photo? Well, to be with respect, I never said she did ovulate. The point is, in this photo, she is now past the stage of having ovulated, meaning she isn't looking to breed with Ozzy. Now, thankfully, if you've seen my videos, you know that I've got a pretty big cage. So Ozzy's still in here with Harriet. He's just not trying to breed with her because she's more than likely showing him signs that she's gravid and that she doesn't want to breed with him, and he's figured that out. You're also probably again asking, well, Alex, how come you didn't get a photo on the exact day? If you look at this little red X right there, that's a screenshot on my laptop because I was on a FaceTime call with mom and dad because I was at school. This was my spring semester, even though up in Wisconsin it is winter and it is hardly anything near spring. But the point is I'm trying to do the best I can getting comparative photos. So here she is, middle of the body is swelling here. Within the time from this photo to this photo, she ovulates. So let's just call it happy and say this middle black line represents her ovulating, say 2 weeks after this photo, a week after this photo, depending on when she started vitellogenesis. And now she has ovulated. Those ova have entered the oviducts, creating this much more rotund shape in the body. And we know that those eggs are growing rapidly by the day because we can see how flabby her legs are, and we can see the exaggerated hip bone in the shrinking tail base, which we do not see here. Yolk creation on this side, post-ovulation, and she is now gravid in this photo. If you don't believe me, again, here she is sitting on the same branch, but this photo was taken a week after this photo. So more than likely, this is her last week of going through yolk creation. Maybe she mated with Ozzy a couple of times. We can guess this because we can see her nuchal crest is torn up. The male Chinese water dragons will grab the nuchal crest of the female in order to hold them down while copulating. They can be pretty secretive about it, though. In the 5 years I've been breeding Chinese water dragons, I've only ever seen 3 confirmed locks. So I try not to really look at whether or not I can catch them mating. This is why I'm sharing this presentation, because you truly want to look at your females for visual and behavioral cues. So as I was saying, vitellogenesis, body is sort of more, I almost want to say like think football shaped, right? It's not like a pear or like a nectarine or something. Well, I guess nectarine's round. But the point is think like pear shaped post ovulation, and we can see the hip bone isn't as prevalent. Whereas exactly 2 weeks later, she's on the exact same branch. And here you can see her body gets really swollen right here because again, those ova have moved into the oviduct. They've been fertilized. And now her hip bone and her legs are flabby and her hip bone's more prevalent just because she's drawing nutrients. So hopefully that makes sense. And again, I tried to get images that show her on the same areas so you can compare. Again, yolk creation, this is when she's mating. She's done mating, eggs have been fertilized, and here she is post-ovulation. So let's line up all 3 photos, including another photo I have her being very close to laying eggs. Again, vitellogenesis, yolk creation, football-shaped body, hip bones aren't as prevalent, legs are nice and full. She ovulates. Ovulation, now those ova have moved into the oviducts. They have been fertilized, and she is drawing nutrients to let those eggs grow and get them calcified and all that good stuff before they lay. And then this photo is pretty much the final stages of being gravid. You can see again, she's using the same stick here, but look how wide she is because quite literally this photo was taken 2 days before she ended up laying all these beautiful eggs. So hopefully that makes sense. But I now know what the real thinkers are assuming here. Alex, you have a beautiful example of vitellogenesis and then to post-ovulation, morphology and how she looks all the way through the gravidity stage and then eggs. But I only have it for 1 year. Oh my gosh, guys, you got me. It's almost like you haven't been watching my channel, and it's almost like I haven't been taking notes on breeding this species for the past few years. It would almost be like hypocritical of me to try and back up my scientific claims on this without showing that, oh, would you look at that? Here is the exact same process reiterated last year. Look at that. So this is the day she laid. More than likely, a few days went by and she started her second cycle. I wasn't able to catch that, unfortunately, because I was at school, because this was the day I saw a Shinedown concert last year, and it was awesome. They played Cut the Cord, which is my favorite song by them. Anyways, here she is later, photo from my folks. Hip bone is starting to get present, and the body's got more of that pear shape, meaning she is now post-ovulation, or she did ovulate, and now she just has to get ready and lay the eggs. Here she is. I had this photo in my presentation last year, if I'm not mistaken, 3 days before she laid eggs. Look how prevalent those hip bones are. Look how flabby the legs are. And again, the fat pads are shrunk on the head. And then eggs were laid. So, okay, guys, I get it now. Alex, cool. You've got another photo example of this process from vitellogenesis to ovulation to gravidity to eggs being laid. But Alex, you're only showing photos with your one female. So it could be sample bias. Why would I make a claim on data which only comes from one animal? Dang it, guys, you got me. It's almost like you forget that I network with a bunch of other Chinese water dragon breeders. So here is a photo set from my good friend Joe down in Florida. And to eliminate more of that bias, he keeps all of his Chinese water dragons outside year-round in sunny South Florida, meaning they go through completely different conditions year-round. It's not constant like it is indoors for me. And yet, February 2023, right when Harriet was starting, and I want you guys to pay attention at this female right here. Oh, good, I can zoom in while recording. Look how nice and swollen her body is. But see how it's that football shape? That is vitellogenesis. And unlike me, Joe has a photo taken in February of his male copulating with a female going through vitellogenesis. All right, so let's zoom out. Here is the female post-ovulation. So she is gravid, and look at that. The head pads are shrunken in, and the hip bones are present. Legs look flabby, and bam, there's eggs, which were laid at the end of March. 5-week process. Just like what I've seen with Harriet for years and years and years. And if you don't believe me, I'll happily do the exact same photo set from this year, the year before, and I can really dig through it and get it from 2019. If you guys don't believe me, I just didn't want to bore you with examples and examples. But the point is, 5-week process, 2 weeks of vitellogenesis, 3 weeks of gravidity post-ovulation. You're welcome. So now that we have the reproductive cycle out of the way, let's get to the real talk. The eggs, right? Like, okay, I got 2 clutches of eggs. You're going to notice right away my second clutch has got a couple odd eggs, and I'm going to highlight these later on. But pretty much I was home to collect this first clutch of eggs, and it was really exciting because normally my dad collects them while I'm at school, but this was actually the Sunday of NARBC. I came home. I actually ended up skipping the show that day, saw a talk with Jane Goodall and my buddy Rex, and that was really exciting. But the point is, here were the nice pearly white eggs. I know what you're thinking, man, those eggs look good. Spoiler alert, none of them were. And then here are these 12 eggs with some odd looking eggs right here in one slug. Now, some of you guys may be wondering, and I realize I didn't cover this in my last video. Here's my incubator. So this is the 36-inch hot box incubator. It's a forced air incubator. I kept the air incredibly humid in there, as you can see by the condensation, and that's because I had an open tray of water on the bottom of the incubator, as well as water bottles placed all throughout the bottom to maintain a very stable temperature. Water has a high specific heat, so if you've seen my incubator setup video, you'll sort of understand my methodology for letting those down there, and so that way that forced air incubator then is blowing air across the water bottles, which slows the speed of the air. And there are a whole bunch of other complicated features that go into that, but the point is that it's a forced air incubator, and yeah, that's what I was incubating the eggs in. And then I had a VE200 thermostat on pulse. I normally don't use the VE stats, however, that's what the incubator came with, and I didn't have a Herpstat 1 to swap it out with yet. So you can see there's one of the egg boxes in there. This photo was taken after these eggs had gone bad, but again, we'll talk about those later. And yeah, there's the other clutch of eggs in the sim container. All of these clutches I incubated in a sim container this year. So here is the first clutch of eggs. Unfortunately, I only had one good baby hatch, even if you want to say good. Incubation lasted 79 days in the sim container, which I was surprised about because supposedly eggs hatch faster in the sim container. But if you look at this photo right here, unfortunately, this baby hatched out really weak. It had kinks in its back. This photo was taken actually about 3 days after it hatched, and you can see it's lying on its side. I hate to say it, guys. The baby ended up dying. It just did not do well. Unfortunately, I think it had some neurological disorders, so I'm not sure what was up with that. One thing that I will say, though, if you look at it compared to my thumb, look how big it hatched out. And so this is why I'm a big advocate for incubating these Chinese water dragons at 82 to 83 degrees Fahrenheit. Cook them a little bit cooler than what a lot of people say. That way the incubation lasts longer. They hatch out bigger. And normally they're healthier. I think this was just an odd baby case because as you can see in this photo, there's mold on literally all of these other eggs. And then the one egg that was actually big enough had a dead baby inside. So it kind of sucked. I'm not sure what was up with that. Part of me wonders if it was just because Harriet had a lot of bad eggs last year, and so that took a toll on her body since she is 10 years old as of this breeding season. So she's an older girl. She's up there in age for a breeder. But either way, I also just wanted to quickly highlight too that by incubating with the sim container, there's increased oxygen around the egg. And so that egg was completely empty, even though this baby hatched out kinked, which means that it absorbed all its yolk, which would contribute to having a nice big healthy baby. So it really sucked because like I said, this was the only egg that hatched. It was the first clutch and the baby ended up dying. So then the second clutch hatched and the first baby this time pipped at 68 days of incubation, which definitely made a lot more sense. Generally when I've incubated at 83 in the past, not in a sim container, they go just over 70 days. So the fact that this one hatched a bit earlier made more sense. You can see again a nice big baby poking his head out there. And then of this clutch of 12, there were only 2 eggs that made it the full term. Again, I wonder if maybe just Ozzy didn't get the job fully done, or perhaps there was a case of just issues with her laying. Maybe the sim container had something to do with it. A lot of factors. I also called a buddy of mine, and they said Harriet was, 10 years old, and she's had over 100 eggs in her life at this point. So it could be she's just running out of good eggs in her body. As I said at the start of the video, Every animal's born with a set number of offspring they can have. So maybe her ova that she's using now are sort of the lower end ones, if you will. But as you can see, this first baby hatched, and this baby did great. Then this second baby hatched, and it's hard to see with this photo, but unfortunately, this baby hatched with a deformed foot, and that's why I suspected it hatched exactly 6 days later. So we look at the video, and again, I feel like it had neurological issues. I'm sorry if this video is disturbing, seeing sort of a sad baby trying to swim, but you can see that the foot's deformed, and unfortunately, it just never ate. And within 2 weeks, it just withered away and died. So really, really sad. Again, it's just part of the reality of breeding reptiles. Not everything goes perfectly in nature. If that baby hatched out and it can't run, it's going to get picked off within 2 minutes of coming out of the ground because it's going to make a noise in the leaf litter. That's the reality of nature. And with respect, if it did end up eating, I more than likely would have taken it to the vet and had it euthanized. I really don't believe in special needs animals, which I know is a controversial statement. I just feel that this is a species that is so rarely bred, and myself and others trying to focus on breeding more healthy individuals, I want to breed animals that nature would have selected to. I don't do morphs of Chinese water dragons, not that there are any, but even if there were, I wouldn't do it. I'd rather breed large, healthy adults that will breed and make large, healthy babies just as nature intended. So you're probably asking, this poor guy didn't make it. How's this little dude doing? Well, he's great. This is a photo of him at 8 days old. As of this video, I'm actually about ready to ship it out to a friend of mine. They're going to be working with my bloodline because I didn't want to just sell it to anybody. But yeah, he's 7 weeks old as of filming this video, so he's actually a lot bigger. I just don't have any updated photos of him because I don't really take a ton of photos, especially right now with the baby, just because I was so worried I was going to lose it. But he's doing great. And yeah, it's kind of exciting, right? Like Harriet is a 10-year-old water dragon, and despite the low fertility, she still is cranking out at least one healthy baby, which is this cute little lad or lass right here. I haven't even bothered to try flashlight sexing it because I just wanted to get it eating, and it grew really quickly. It's pushing, I think now, like 7 inches at 7-8 weeks. So that's what I've got going for you there. So I told you guys I was going to mention these odd eggs. And as much as I love Harriet for being a great breeder, I reached out to a couple people that I know in the sort of world of veterinary studies. So that would be Erica McVeigh and Jessica Ward. They were really useful resources. And one thing that I had noticed were these odd attachments on these infertile eggs. It was really, really weird. So unfortunately, an aspect of captivity is this process known as chronic salpingitis, which what happened is that more than likely Harriet wanted to have 14 eggs in this clutch because there were 12. And these are areas in her oviducts that went to calcify ova that were never there because quite literally she's just low on eggs. She's 10 years old. She wanted to have 14 eggs, but her body chose to only release 12 eggs. And so what happens is when her oviducts release the calcium to calcify the eggs, you end up getting these stringy calcified bits because that, in a sense, is calcium forming in the lining of the oviduct, which can be actually very dangerous to a female because if these get too hard or if the female's really overweight and doesn't have the muscle to push those out of her oviducts, quite literally, it's like a form of non-egg binding, and they get stuck in there and they could cause an infection. So thankfully, on June 12th, I took Harriet to the vet, and you can see this is where her oviducts would be. And there's actually some food in her stomach there, if I'm not mistaken. But there are no calcified bits in her body. And you can see like her bone structure looks really well. My vet complimented how good her bone density is because you guys know me, I use that good old calcium and good old UVB lighting. So she gets that every feeding. But thankfully, no calcified bits in her. One thing that I did notice, and I told the vet about this, is that she would pass some interesting urates, which then after showing my vet photos were actually more little calcified structures like this. However, that only lasted a few weeks after she laid these. So I had finished school It was the past May. So she had laid this clutch April 28th. I had finals. I came home, and pretty much all throughout May, she was passing stuff like this. I just kept her hydrated and kept feeding her like a lot of earthworms and stuff that was not very, I guess, hard or crunchy. And sure enough, by the time she got this x-ray, she looked perfect. So because of this, and I believe this is what my next slide is, I have good news and bad news based on those findings. I would give you guys a choice and say good news or bad news first, but listen, guys, I wanna end this video strong. And so the bad news is, because of Harriet showing signs of chronic salpingitis and her age, guys, I've had her 10 years. And screw it, why am I'm not doing the data slides anymore. Hi, you should be able to see me now, I think, or maybe my camera's not on. There we go. That's better. So because of Harriet having chronic salpingitis, I am making the choice to not intentionally breed or cycle her anymore. The only reason I would ever have her breed with Ozzy or a future male down the line is if she cycles an infertile clutch of eggs on her own and does not show any signs of those stringy like eggs, which would indicate she's continuing to have the process of salpingitis. I got lucky, guys. Any one of those calcified bits could have stayed stuck in her and she would have been dead within a year, most likely because of a oviduct infection. I don't want to risk that. I've had her this long. She's been a great breather. She's had over 100 eggs. She's mothered over 60 babies. I'm not going to compromise her health just so I can pump out more eggs. So that's sort of the bad news, guys. I'm a keeper before I'm a breeder. I love Harriet. I love Ozzy. I love my water dragons. I'm not going to breed them for the sake of views or anything like that, which you see other content creators do. So it means if you want to get captive bred water dragons from me, I'd say I don't know when the next time I'll be breeding them, but here is the announcement. So background on said announcement. This is a post from Michael Barrera. He runs Snakes at Sunset. Chinese water dragons, as some of you may know, are now listed under CITES Appendix 2, which is awesome because it means now that the importation of wild-caught animals has to be regulated. Here's the thing. The only country that exports them is Vietnam. And Vietnam, from what I understand, does not regularly export CITES Appendix animals. And because of that, they have stopped exporting wild-caught water dragons, which is pretty good considering there were like thousands of them that are taken out of the wild. This also means that they're going to be incredibly rare, and there's not a lot of people breeding them. There are a lot of people that want Chinese water dragons, and a lot of people now that probably won't be able to find cheap wild-caught water dragons, which is also good because those people just want them because they're cheap. But for the serious keepers out there that say you've seen my videos and you've seen my content providing big naturalistic enclosures with enrichment and giving them the best lighting and all that, you guys still need to source a captive bred water dragon. So Snakes at Sunset got in one last order of them, and a buddy and I bought all of them. So they're young, and I'll show you guys right here. This is going to be the start of phase 2 of Alex's Agamids. Guys, I'm getting ready to graduate with my degree from college. So I sent my share of the water dragons to Capital City Critters, who is somebody I trust very dearly. I've been collaborating with them on a couple other things. And this is going to be the raise ups. They are currently raising up this the group of water dragons for me. I will finish school. I will finish raising them up, and I'm hoping by 2026 or 2027, I will be able to start offering water dragons to the public for sale. Captive bred ones, of course. I do not bring in imports and sell wild caught animals. That's not my thing. So that's the good news. You know, just because I'm not breeding water dragons does not mean I will not be working with them. And that's something that I wanted to emphasize. So yes, it's kind of sad that this is going to be my last breeding update for a while. And honestly, probably one of my last YouTube videos for a while. But I will be working with the species. And that I can promise you guys is something that I will continue to do as long as I am able to. And there might be some other species I'm working with right now, but I'm not saying anything. So here are all of my references. I would like to thank Joe DiGiorgio, good buddy in Florida, breeding water dragons. I want to thank Kristen Richards of Capital City Critters, just for providing the photos of the babies that I just showed you guys that I got shipped to her. I'd like to thank my professor of animal physiology, Dr. Sarah Jane Alger, because she covered the unit on reproduction. And I think as far as my initial notes on the process of vitellogenesis to ovulation through the process of gravidity and then oviposition in water dragons, I wouldn't be able to understand that or even figure that out if it wasn't for her initial lectures taking animal physiology as a class. So thank you. I'd also like to thank Dr. Alyssa Augie, that's my veterinarian, for keeping an eye on Harriet, providing the x-rays for of her. Really just a valuable resource and somebody that I take a lot of inspiration from as far as trying to not only keep and breed reptiles, but make sure I'm doing it correctly and safely for the health and well-being of my breeders, or in this case, Harriet. I'd like to thank Dr. Shelley DeBay, who is my captive wildlife professor. She oversees my minor degree that I'm finishing up this year. And again, as far as the captive animal husbandry techniques, both as a career and for my own private personal collections, I just want to thank her. And then lastly, I also want to thank Erica McVeigh and Jessica Ward for their comments as far as, again, chronic salpingitis and the issues that I saw. I also, too, referenced, Bert Langerworf's book on water dragons pertaining to some of the breeding aspects. And then since I did mention CITES, it's only fair that I cite the paper that truly covers them being listed on the IUCN Red List. So while I didn't take anything from that paper, as I mentioned it, and I want to make sure I'm giving credit where credit is due. And all of these references will be listed in the video description as well, because again, I really would not be able to make this content without people who are helping and sharing information. So there's the 2023 Chinese water dragon breeding season update for you. As always, if you have direct questions that cannot be answered in this video, feel free to shoot me an email below. Email is the best way to reach out to me because as a student and as somebody who will be working soon, I have email on my phone, which you can't see because of my Zoom green screen, but it's just the best way to reach out with any questions. And you can always follow and message me through my social media pages listed in the video description. Without further ado, I am Alex with Alex's Agamids, and thank you so much for your viewership and support over the years. I'm looking forward to seeing what I can share next. Adios.